Hi everyone, Kat Clay here, and today I have a couple of really awesome people here on the video. I've got Freya Mask and Simone Corletto, two of my friends who are both writers, to talk about their experience of NaNoWriMo. And I know a lot of you are probably getting ready for Nano, given it's November and it's not too far away. So I thought I'd ask them their top tips and their best advice for how to succeed at Nano and what success actually looks like. So I might start with you, Freya. If you could just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what your experience of NaNoWriMo has been before.
Sure, I'm Freya Musk. I'm a writer and podcaster. My debut novel is coming out from Tor.com Publishing next year, and I have so far attempted NaNoWriMo twice in 2015 and 2019. It would be great if I could tell you that those attempts had anything to do with the debut novel that is coming out next year. They do not, but my 2015 attempt, I did write over 60,000 words that year, and last year I did not quite make it to 50.
That's really impressive from my point of view, because I think the most I've written in a nano attempt is 15,000 words. So I'm always really impressed when people kind of get up those big numbers in 1 month. Simone, what about you?
So my name's Simone. I'm a Sydney-based writer and I work in publishing. I realized yesterday I first signed up to NaNoWriMo in 2009. I didn't first attempt it to 2012, but I have participated and won 5 or 6 times. And I've also worked as a municipal liaison, which is like a coordinator for my local regions for the last 3 years. And while I haven't published anything yet, the novel that I have been working on the last year and a half to polish up and query was a nano novel 4 years ago. And fingers crossed, we're going to start sending it out later this year.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting when you get to that phase of actually sending your book out into the world. It's a bit scary, but it's a huge achievement to actually get to that point. I was wondering, Simone, because you've been quite involved with Nano, kind of how did you first get involved and how did you go that first year you did it?
So I think I first heard about Nano just through being like on the internet. And yeah, like when I first signed up, I started my science degree, which I found quite difficult to try and do nano during because we had all our exams around November. It wasn't until I did my second degree in creative writing where we had like no exams but assignments that I had the time for it. So yeah, once I got to that point, I joined my local region. So like on the Nano website, they really encourage this and I also highly recommend it. You'll find like there's a community tab and, there'll be like, there's groups in every major capital city around the world. And so you just find where you live and then join. And then you'll have like an entire little side forum of other people doing the same thing. So yeah, getting involved in that really changed the game for me, just as a writer in general, because then I was suddenly meeting all these like brand new other writers who I'd never met before. And like, especially when you live in a smaller city and you don't really have a lot of like writing groups, it can be hard to meet other nerds who are also into writing. So yeah, I joined the group and then we had like a lot of in-person meetups during the month. And then, yeah, I found just the support I got really helped me get over the line. And I won that year, which was unexpected. It was a struggle. It's a struggle every year. It doesn't necessarily get easier no matter how often you do it. But I was very proud to reach 50,000 words on the last day, which is a tradition of mine now.
That's pretty awesome though, like 50,000 words in a month on the last day. Like you must feel awesome when you hit that kind of like that mark.
Yeah, and it's definitely a cause for celebration. I think usually I get myself some cake from the cafe that I'm in, even though I'm eating cake the rest of the time as well. But like it's a special celebratory cake. But yeah, and that last day is usually like a mad sprint. Like I think last year I wrote like 10,000 words in the last day because I was quite behind. And you don't know how much you can write until you're like down to the line and under pressure and you're everywhere, like, 13, 14 other people around you doing the exact same thing.
The year that I did do it, I actually was relatively new to Melbourne and I kind of used it also too as an opportunity to meet other writers and nerds, like you said. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. We kind of met up in Melbourne Central Food Court and would write there and met some cool people there. I think Nano doesn't necessarily work for me through my process. I tend to write a lot at the start and a lot at the end, and like dawdle through the middle over a period of several months, which, but from my experience, like the one time that I did attempt it, when I did write those 15,000 words, that actually ended up being quite successful for me in that I got that published, I got paid for that. And that actually was really great that I sat down and kind of broke through a lot of those mental barriers, I think, in terms of my process, and kind of challenged myself to do that. So that was really good aspect of it. Freya, what about you? What was your kind of first experience? Was that early one where you hit the 60,000 word mark?
Yes, but it was an unusual one in that I wrote fan fiction rather than original fiction. And I wrote 8 fanfics for Yuletide 2015, and that was how I got my 60,000 words. I think for Australians, it's probably quite a similar story, is that 2015 was the first year I didn't have any kind of exam that was around November. I'd always been aware of NaNoWriMo and I'd seen my friends doing it, but I'd always had high school exams, undergrad exams, medical school exams, specialty exams. And then finally in 2015, I was free of exams. So I thought, right, this is the year. And I didn't have at that time a long original project that I wanted to work on, because I was still gearing myself up to write long original things, because writing fanfic was how I had kept myself developing but also slightly sane over all the years of study. And so I just thought, okay, let's see what I can do in terms of sheer word count. And I got to 60,000. But I think the reason it's been more difficult for me since then is because writing 60,000 words of fanfic is a different proposition to writing 50,000 words of an original story.
Yeah, you're so right there. I could totally do a whole nother video on how fanfic or writing fanfic prepares you to be a novelist. But I'm curious what kind of fanfic you wrote.
Oh God, I can't. Okay, there were about 8 stories and they were across a wide range of fandoms. One of them was a Hamilton fanfic, which I wrote in verse. Like I sat there for half of November saying things aloud to myself in my kitchen to try and make the assonance and the internal rhymes work out. Obviously, that did not contribute a lot towards the word count. I mean, it's all there. It's all on AO3 somewhere. But
that's amazing.
One of them was for Jurassic World, I think, because I got really angry about how the female character in Jurassic World was being treated. And I was like, I will save her. I will redeem her. I will write her story.
That's speaking my language. No, because I too have like grievances with the depiction of the female character in Jurassic World. Not to mention running around the jungle in high heels is not a sensible move from an avid camper. I can tell you now, not a good move. I kind of want to know like how Nano has changed your process. So I mean, Simone, like you're writing as well. You've written or you're writing a book at the moment. How has Nano helped you develop as a writer there?
It definitely has not made me a more consistent writer. I tend to like go into like November and I go hard and I write my 50,000 words, and the rest of the year it's like super hit and miss. I'm actually quite slow normally. My first novel I've been working on for like 12 years now. And that is the stage where like I'm trying to like start sending it out, but like it's too long. There's other reasons behind that. But I do use Nano to like hash out any new idea, any first drafts. I don't write new things. The rest of the year is for rewriting and for like polishing, but November is for first drafts. And that's actually been really handy. Because like the book that I've been working on now, which is like a sci-fi, I initially went in and was speaking to an agent last year at a conference, and I pitched my first book, which is a superhero novel. And she was like, yeah, this is great, but like the market isn't super great for superhero novels. What else do you have? And then just that week, I'd been thinking about the Nano draft that I'd written in like, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. And then I was like, I have a space novel. And I kind of just like pitched it then and there, making up an elevator pitch to go. She was like, that's great. How long is it? I'm like, about 50,000 words. She's like, double that. I'll give you 1.5 years. So that's what I've been doing. So yeah, I think if you're serious about going into noveling, like the career as a novelist, it's really handy to have a backlist of drafts and ideas. And yeah, Nano is a great time to develop those. So you can go to an agent. I have this thing. Let me just, do another round.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice, because I think one of the things that I would recommend coming out of Nano is that that's not your final draft. Like, something you've hashed out over a month is awesome that you've put down the bones of a story, but it certainly needs to go through editing process. And actually that's something that I've used Nano to do. Instead of doing the writing aspect, I've challenged myself to edit my novel in a month. So I've set myself kind of deadlines and page numbers that I need to get to each day. And I actually found that a really helpful process. So I called it kind of my Nano Edmo experience. But certainly using that dedicated time to say, I'm going to do this thing is really helpful. What about you, Freya? Has Nano changed your process for you?
It's made me a lot more self-aware about my process and about both my limitations and my capabilities, I would say. So that first year where I showed myself I could win and write that many words, it was the first time I really set myself a word goal that high for a set period. So that was the value for me, was saying, look, I can write at that pace. Of course, Writer Brain now holds up past Freya as the favoured child for comparison and says, look, you have done this in the past. Why can't you do it again? When the answer is that writing original fiction is different. And I know that to write an original novel, or even just 50,000 words of an original novel, because I long draft and I've never written a first draft that's less than 120,000 words. So even to get 50,000 words of something original done in a month, I know is a different process for me. And that's why I failed. Well, partly I failed last year because I'd just come off writing a very long fantasy novel and I forgot that I might need a break in between manuscripts. So I just leapt into writing a romance novel with no break. And halfway through the month, my stamina abruptly gave out. So I did write every day, which was a secondary goal, but I hadn't realised that part of my process is that I do need a break, and I just hadn't timed that correctly. But also I do know that for me, I've learned more about what my capabilities are. So how much can I get done in a half hour of dedicated focus, and what amount of planning do I need to do in order to be able to keep up that pace over a prolonged period?
Yeah, you make such good points as well, because I think there is a certain unique self-awareness that you develop through Nano, that even if there's two things you said that really I felt were really important, which was that idea that you prove to yourself that you can do this thing. And that's a huge mental challenge for writers who are approaching a novel for the first time. I remember going, I don't know if I can do this. And I was lucky enough to have a friend who said, I believe in you, you can actually do this. And that kind of helped me get over the line to go, I'm going to write a full-length novel manuscript. But that is a really challenging kind of mental block if you've never written 60,000, 70,000 upwards words before. I think the other thing you touch on, which leads very nicely into that question about preparing for Nano, it's not just that you go on the 1st of November, you go, oh, I'm going to write a book after you've been working on something really intense for so long. It's kind of this preparation that you need to do before that first day. So Freya, I might ask you first, is there anything that you do to prepare, or like you mentioned, kind of being kind to yourself, maybe whether you have kind of mental or, just normal writing preparations that you do before attempting something like that?
Yeah, I'm much more down the planning architect side of the spectrum when it comes to being a writer. So the faster I need to write, the more planning I need to have done before I even sit down to think about creating words. So before I start any novel now, I have at least a list of scenes with a couple of sentences for what each scene is for, which is very much in the planning side of things. On a day-to-day level, I also like to make sure when I sit down at the start of the session, before I start thinking, okay, dive in, make words, I've got a few dot points at least as to what I want to achieve in the scene that I'm up to. Because the thing that stops me in my tracks is a blank outline or opening a new scene and thinking, okay, what actually does need to happen here? And I can't make that happen through writing it. I have to have a bit of an outline, and then I can make the outline into prose. So I like to have that done at the beginning of the session, or even at the end of the previous day's session, so that when I sit down the next day, I can leap right in.
Yeah, I'm a planner too. And I think when I've gone to Nano, or when I've gone to those kind of speed writing things, I tend to write something that's fun and I don't need to plot too heavily for. So I'll write a little outline. But certainly the thing that I did write was more absurd than anything else, and fantasy comedy. And that was fun for me to write, but also didn't require this complex 3 months plotting spree with like 10 spreadsheets and 90 palm cards, as I have done for certain other books that I've written. What about you, Simone? Like, how do you prepare for Nano?
So I guess on the spectrum between plotter, pantser, and plantser, I'm definitely a plantser. I don't plot out my entire novel. I love to go in with like a cast of characters and knowing who they are and like what their kind of trope or archetype is, and then having like at least the first 5 or so chapters, like an idea of where I'm going. And then I usually get to like 10,000 words and panic and try to plot out my next 10,000 words. But I also like the discovery of like new ideas that come kind of writing in that way. I know there are some people who need to like plot out their entire book chapter by chapter. And there are some people who go in day one, no idea, still manage to reach the end. I don't know how they do it. It's quite amazing. But I need to have a good idea of at least like my next couple of chapters and like a bare bones plot. Like, where am I writing to? Where is the end kind of going to be? So like, what am I getting towards? But I love some of the spontaneity that can come out of like being stuck and then being, I'm going to write from this character's perspective, or like, I'm going to suddenly add a subplot where this happens, or something that I did a lot in my space book in my first draft was just add a lot of sex scenes that I have all edited out because this is supposed to be YA. But you can have a lot of fun in Nano and just write whatever weird impulse that you have. It's the time to play.
One of the things I find really helpful too, if you're going to go down that kind of plantser or pantser route, is to have an endpoint in mind. I tend to think that it's always good to know kind of where you want to end up and where you're working to, and that can help kind of anchor the direction of your story, even if you're not going through and plotting it out religiously. I think this kind of leads in really nicely too to, I would love to know what your best tips for doing Nano are. Like, I think preparation is key. I think not putting too much pressure on yourself if you're like not perceiving it as a kind of fail if you haven't reached those 50,000 words. But I'd love to hear from you, Simone, as someone who's organized it. Like, what tips would you give to somebody starting out?
So firstly, join your region. This year, everything's going to be online. We're not allowed to have in-person meetings because of COVID, which makes it even more accessible than ever. And so, you'll probably have a lot of like Discord chats. Everything's big on Discord. You don't even have to meet people in person if you don't want to. You can just talk to them by text or voice chat. And it's having a writing community, I find, is just really crucial. Some of my best friends have come from my Adelaide NaNoWriMo region. And it really helps motivate you, just seeing other people also working on similar things. And having like writing sprints is where I get most of my work done. Where you'll sit there, there'll be a bot in Discord, and it'll be like, okay, guys, 20 minutes, start writing now. And then you sit down and you write for 20 minutes. And then, at the end, you'll report how many words you did. And if you're competitive like me, that can be also very motivating. And if not, you'll find sometimes just like the act of putting everything aside and just writing focused for 20 minutes can have some genius pop out, or some terrible things. Either way, it still works. But so getting involved in your local region is really crucial. Just kind of stop worrying about the quality. It's good, don't want to write just like stream of consciousness, but also you can. There are no rules in NaNoWriMo. You can literally write whatever you like. Quality is for the second draft. You can, edit it later. But don't get too bogged down about like typos if you don't want to. Just, write those words and just let your creativity really flow.
I think you have such a great point there that I'd never heard of, like a Discord bot that, is basically your writing coach. I love that idea. I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna set up a little Discord bot that, gets on my back to write. That's pretty cool. And I think the other thing you mentioned too, which is the self-editing point I talk a lot about, which is don't self-edit. That's the worst. Like, it just kills your writing process because you'll just get stuck kind of re-editing the same chapter. So you'll have like this first chapter that's really good and then no other chapters after it. So that's a great point you make. What about you, Freya? Got any tips for us?
I absolutely agree that sprints with a buddy or buddies is the best way to keep yourself accountable. I would also say don't be afraid to set either a different goal or a secondary goal. Like, if you know that 50,000 words is going to be a really big stretch for you, and failure to stay on track is just going to be another stick that you can use to beat yourself over the head because writers are great at that, then set yourself a goal of, okay, even if I'm falling down off the curve and even if I don't make it, I still want to write something every day, because that can stop you from, reaching day 10, looking at yourself below the curve and going, oh, it's not this year, I guess, and just stopping altogether. So either set yourself a lower goal or a secondary goal of something every day, I think is quite useful so that you can get the most out of the month. I would also say clear things off the deck in the month if you can. Like, don't put too many other things in it, but also be aware that nothing breeds procrastination like a full empty day that you've set aside for yourself and said, today I will get so much done. For me, that is a recipe to reach 7 p.m. and go, oh, I have been putting off the writing all day. I certainly get a lot more done if I know I have like an hour here, an hour there, in which the writing has to get done because that's the time I have in the day. So it's again about knowing yourself and knowing how your brain works and how your process works, but be aware of the blissfully empty day. You're not going to be as productive as you think you are.
Oh my goodness, I feel very seen. That's terrible, Freya. I am the eternal empty day procrastinator, whereas I think this is something that I found challenging in lockdown because I kind of thrive on a busy schedule, that if I'm not at this kind of medium level of busy, I'm either procrastinating too much and then kind of putting pressure on myself to write, but then kind of hang on, I just spent 8 hours playing video games. What am I? That last question I want to ask you guys is just about if you were talking to somebody who had never done NaNoWriMo before, what would you say to them if they were thinking of doing it?
Just give it a go. Don't be obsessed with other people and high achievers and the people who can do 200,000 words in 2 days. Don't let them affect you, because no one else's writing is going to affect how you go. So yeah, I guess my biggest advice is just give it a go, get involved, surprise yourself, and don't give up. Because yeah, even if you find yourself at day 25 and you only have 10,000 words, you could still do it. You don't know. You could write 10,000 words in a day. I didn't think I could do that till I did it. So yeah, never give up. Just have a go. Just say that 6 more times. Have a go.
How about you, Freya? Have a go?
Have a go. No matter what, you are going to get something out of it. And the something might be that you have 10,000 words at the end of the month that you didn't have before. You might have the beginnings of an idea for a story that you're then going to go on and write over a year. You might have a better idea of how fast you write, what times of day you write. You might have made a couple of friends through your local group that you can then become critique partners or cheerleading buddies with. There is no downside. As long as you can be kind to yourself and say, if I don't finish, it's not the end of the world, you are always going to get something out of the process.
I think that's excellent advice from both of you. And I think it's really important to remind everyone that success looks different for everybody. And it's not about, look, you win if you get to your 50,000 words, but you certainly don't lose if you don't get there. Because like we were saying, all words are good words. You can't learn to write a novel without writing a novel. So it's certainly something that is worthwhile attempting and doing, and you might meet some great people along the way. So I just want to say thank you so much, Freya and Simone, for coming along today and really giving us some awesome tips on how to do nano well. If you've really enjoyed this video today, I would love it if you hit subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay tuned for more writing videos. I'm going to do some more author interviews on the channel. So stick around, and thanks so much for watching.